Innocent though they may appear, Bahamian waters can be deadly, especially during hurricane season. In 1595, a fleet of 17 Spanish treasure ships were wrecked off Abaco in a storm. Spanish naval patrols, whose mission was to protect the treasure convoys, would have visited the Bahamas regularly on the lookout for pirates. It was just 2 years before the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and Drake had already plundered the cities of Santo Domingo and Cartagena. Spanish and other shipwrecks have long been a lure to the Bahamas for treasure hunters. Even today, a license can be obtained to search in Bahamian waters. Government requires only 25% of the value of anything found. The 1640s saw England and her colonies swept up in a bloody civil war over politics and religion. In Bermuda, Anglican supporters of King Charles I turned on Puritan supporters of Parliament, making their lives miserable. In 1647, Captain William Sale, a Bermudian with Puritan sympathies, proposed a venture to establish a plantation of the islands of Eleutheria, formerly called Bahama. Here there would be no king, religious freedom was guaranteed, and for a mere £100, investors could own a large piece of Eleuthera. Several Puritan families joined Captain Sale's ship, the William, in the summer of that 1648, hoping for a better life in the Bahamas. They barely survived, and as soon as possible went home. Yet in the telephone directory today are the names of several whose adventurer ancestors did return to become the first English settlers. Beecher's Cave on North Eleuthera is worth a visit, but beware of Devil Backbone Reef. By 1670, there was a new settlement on the island of New Providence, sponsored by the Lords Proprietors of Carolina and named Charlestown after King Charles II. The English, French, and Dutch were then fighting against Spain in the Americas. With ships in short supply, they authorized colonial governors to issue letters of marque to sea captains, commissioning them to attack enemy shipping as privateers and to share any profits. Major shipping lanes to and from the Americas passed the Bahamas. The proprietary governors there were often poor, not only in caliber, but also in fact. In the 1690s, visiting sea captains would have found a bustling little town, now named Nassau, with 100 houses, a church, and a fort, much of it built from the proceeds of privateering. Nassau Harbor still attracts sea captains from near and far. However, any sharing of prize money today tends to be done in the casinos of the towering cruise ships that bring so many visitors to the Bahamas. Privateering could flourish as long as England and France battled for control of North America. But when Queen Anne's War ended, hundreds of loyal Englishmen based in the Bahamas suddenly found their livelihood cut off. Yet merchant ships continued to sail the nearby shipping lanes, and for many the temptations to plunder was too strong. There was an added attraction. During the war, Nassau had been destroyed by the old enemy Spain and abandoned by the Lords Proprietors. But the harbour was still safe for refitting and sharing out loot. The town may have been in ruins, but rum, women, and entertainment could still be found. And nobody was in charge. These colorful robes gave the Bahamas a bad name at the time, but now they're good for tourism. Today in Nassau, a visitor can buy a pirate t-shirt, enjoy a rum punch at Blackbeard's Cove, or spend a day on Blackbeard's Key. Rogers became a hero in Queen Anne's War after a 3-year voyage pillaging Spanish properties around the world. In 1718, he persuaded the new King George I to lease the Bahamas from the Lords Proprietors and commission him to clean up and develop the island. However, getting former pirates to develop the islands was more difficult. By 1721, Rogers had spent all his money. He returned to England in debtor's prison. Rogers died in Nassau, but there's no headstone that marks his grave. Still, there is a fine plaque to see at the House of Assembly in front of the British Colonial Hotel, a bronze statue of the bold Captain Rogers. This is an amazing map. You look at it, and you see Andros in 1730. No wonder people got lost. I love that. No doubt, well, you can read that. In the 1740s and 1750s, Nassau grew in size and substance thanks to an almost constant warring between the French and the English over their North American colonies, which once again allowed profits to be made from privateering. England's final victory in 1763 was a costly one, and her efforts to pay for it by taxation drove her colonists to begin open rebellion in 1775. The first visit of the rebels was such a success that they returned for more in 1778. With Nassau defenseless, Spain, now allied with the Americans, had no trouble invading and occupying New Providence. By the time of Devoe's gallant exploit in 1783, the Revolutionary War had ended and a new era of Bahamian history was about to begin. Have you seen that? Have you been? Anybody seen that? You've been there, right? It's extraordinary.
It is.
Yeah. At the time of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, many colonists declared themselves loyal to King George. Over the next 7 years, they suffered greatly at the hands of patriots. Harassment and physical abuse gave way to right and wrong. Some escaped to British Florida, only to find in 1783 that it had been ceded to Spain, and they had to leave. Over the next 2 years, transportation was arranged for about 7,000 loyalists and their slaves. Most went to New Providence, and this is where the loyalist impact was more lasting. For the first time, someone made it in Abercoast, Cat Island, Long Island, San Salvador, Acklins, and the Proprietary Islands. Sad to say, for many loyalists, the visit was short. Their cotton plantations in the outer islands flourished briefly and then failed. However, the telephone directory today contains the names of many whose loyalist ancestors liked the Bahamas well enough to remain. Africans had been coming to the Bahamas since the 1650s. Thousands arrived in the islands to work the plantations of their loyalist masters. There were some free blacks from the U.S. who settled in Abaco after the war, and they took up arms to defend their rights. Generally, the slaves were a rebellious lot, and runaways were a constant concern both to their owners and the white population. The decline of the plantations in the early 1800s coincided with the movement in Britain to abolish first the slave trade and then slavery itself. As word of emancipation spread, there were slave revolts on Eleuthera, Cat Island, and San Salvador, and in the Exumas, Lord Rolls' slaves rebelled twice in 1828 and 1830. To gauge the impact of Africans on the Bahamas, a visitor need only look around. In a population of nearly 380,000, nearly 85% are of African descent. Not quite so evident, but no less important, are the local art, music, crafts, customs, beliefs, and terminology. Much of this is African in origin, but with a distinctive Bahamian flavor. Look through any booklet on Bahamian dialect, and a whole world of meaning will be revealed. Yeah, look at the difference. This is a map made 100 years later than the first one that we saw, and it's pretty much exactly right. That's in the book. For anyone seeking to escape the winters in New York, a trip to the Bahamas was a serious undertaking. But progress was underway. An industrial revolution had taken place in Britain, and by the late 1800s, the steam engine had been effectively applied in mines and factories. It's a pretty picture. I'll just get up my glass where I want it. The new technology spread quickly to Europe and the Americas. By 1840, Samuel Cunard, son of a loyalist refugee in Canada, was applying it to shipping. Steamships could deliver mail, cargo, and passengers across the Atlantic. There were no hotels to accommodate visitors during winter months, but full room and board were available in several houses at a reasonable rate. Less than $2 a day. One week after the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April 1861, U.S. President Lincoln ordered a blockade of the South. There was an urgent need for the materials of war, but the South had few ships. The privateers were back. In Wilmington, Charleston and Savannah, they took on mail, cotton, and tobacco. Once past the blockade, they ran full steam for the nearest port, Nassau. There they loaded up with vital correspondence and munitions supplied by Europeans, returning to run the blockade. Profits were high, but so were the risks. Over 1,000 blockade runners were captured by the U.S. Navy. The harbor was filled with sleek, fast paddle steamers called Greyhounds. Warehouses and shops appeared for the first time on the north side of Bay Street. The blockade runners would leave when the South surrendered at Appomattox in April 1865, but runners would return within 60 years, although they would be satisfying a demand later for alcohol. In the late 19th century, in fact, it was a French visitor, Gustave Renoir, who saw the potential for profit in sponging as early as 1841. The wide expanses of the Great and Little Bahama banks west of Andros, the Abacos, and the Bight of Acklins provided an ideal habitat for sponges. The Greeks had been diving for sponges in the Aegean since ancient times. Although expert at their trade, the sponges remained poor. In 1887, a number of them visited the Bahamas. It was a huge blow to the economy when in 1938, the sponge beds of the Bahamas were ruined by a malignant fungus. Fishermen today export much of their catch, but they do provide for visitors such delicacies as the spiny lobster, grouper, and conch. The original Greek fishermen were joined by other families, many from Kalymnos, who branched out into other business ventures. Since the late 1700s, farmers in the Bahamas had found citrus and pineapples to be the most profitable crops. By the end of the 19th century, these traditional industries were beginning to feel the effects of competition from abroad. Florida had started growing citrus after the Civil War. Meanwhile, since the 1850s, Hawaii had been encouraging immigrants from many countries to work on pineapple plantations.